Sigma Guide combines the steps for determining the voice of customer and business, the critical requirements of customer and business, and the critical to quality in one tool, Voice to Criticals. To this end, the voices of customers and managers on their wishes and complaints on each of the defined outputs of the SIPOC are first collected. The attribute of the output concerned is derived from these wishes and complaints. Based on this attribute, the critical requirements are defined, and the deviations from these requirements are defined as problems. Then the type of problem is determined as a quality, availability, or consumption problem. According to the needs of the customer, the problems are then categorized according to the Kano model. Afterwards, the customer estimates the frequency with which his or her expectations were fulfilled in the past. Based on this frequency and the Kano category of the attribute, the severity of each problem is calculated. Then the problems are prioritized to identify the problems which are critical to quality. The identification of these CtQs is the purpose of this tool, Voice to Criticals. The necessary information is preferably collected in interviews with the involved customers and managers. Sometimes we pretend to already know the answers of customers and managers without actually questioning them. But this is often a misbelief. No commissioner would be content to solve a case himself in the office without questioning the witnesses. And a Six Sigma project has a certain resemblance to a criminal case. But of course, we are not dealing with murder, we are dealing with problems. But having an attitude like Sherlock Holmes cannot hurt. So, get on your way to the customers of the outputs and the responsible managers of the process steps from the SIPOC if possible. This can also increase the acceptance of the project in your work environment, because customers are typically rarely interviewed on their needs and problems in practice. If you capture these voices, you will get a lot of information and wishes. However, it is not always a matter of requirements, and sometimes it is difficult to distinguish the requirements from further statements. Many process owners and sponsors additionally wish for greater process transparency and sometimes express wishes as to what a solution to the problem could look like. In the first case, I would like to point out that increasing transparency is one of the basic tasks of the project. In the second case, I ask managers not to make their proposed solutions binding in this define phase, but to postpone them until the improve phase. This does, however, not apply to the immediate implementation of quick wins, if their success is guaranteed. The information you need to collect on each SIPOC output is derived from the answers to the questions in this list. I will introduce them as soon as I enter the data in the tool. In many companies, however, it's forbidden to interview external customer. But there are additional sources to also obtain voices of these customers, like voices from internal quality control, sales, customer care, warranty cases, dealers, customer satisfaction surveys, social media, your own experiences and experiences of friends and colleagues. In the most complex case I know, thousands of voice recordings from customer care were analyzed automatically. After you have recorded the voices from all relevant sources, i.e. the answers to the questions, you can enter them into the tool. Voice to Criticals again leads you with a control dialog through its 10 questions for each relevant output to translate the collected voices into evaluated problems. I want to enter the complaint of a customer about the taste of our cookies first and therefore also select Customer from the drop-down list. In the next question to the affected output I enter Cookies baked. All outputs of the SIPOC are listed here. The output state cookies baked is appropriate here because the taste does probably neither change by packaging nor by delivery. In the video Cookie du Chef, you could see the request in the customer's letter. It says that the cookie should taste like grandma's. This is the demand in the customer's voice. And in the interview the customer initially complained that cookies taste of nothing. The next step is to filter out the attribute of the output that underlies the demand versus the complaint. This is not always easy with quality attributes, in contrast to the attribute of availability and consumption. Therefore, I contrast the demand and the complaint in this tool to simplify the identification of the underlying attribute. You may not always be able to determine quality attributes right away, especially for intangible outputs. But with a little practice you will find it easier and easier. In the example, it is easy to derive the affected attribute of our cookies as their taste. On my question, how taste should be, the customers answered mellow, crunchy, sweet. Additionally, the customer specified their complaint about our cookies in cookie taste crumbly bland. And this is the problem. As already mentioned and easy to understand, the requirement on taste and thus also the problem belongs to the category of quality. Question 9 asks for the relevance of this requirement according to the Kano model. The customer consistently told me that they expect a mellow, crunchy, sweet taste as a prerequisite to buy cookies, and that they get angry if they taste crumbly bland. Thus I select must be as the appropriate category of the Kano model. You probably already know the Kano model, but I will introduce it again for some adaptations are made to integrate it into a continuous toolchain. Noriako Kano distinguishes 3 types of requirements for a product or service according to the relationship between the fulfillment of the requirement and the resulting satisfaction. His 3 requirement types are reflected in a 2-dimensional model as surfaces below and above the characteristics of these types. The must-be's are the basic requirements. Their fulfillment is implicitly expected as a norm and lead to dissatisfaction if not fulfilled. Must-be's vary between indifferent or moderately satisfied if the attribute completely meets the requirement, and the customer is angry if the requirements are completely missed. Examples of these basic requirements for cookies are that they must be mellow, crunchy and sweet. If cookies taste crumbly bland or are toxic, we probably won't buy them. The more or less is better performance requirements can lead to dissatisfaction if they are not met and to excitement if they are very pronounced. Our cookies should be fresh, the fresher the better. Inexpensive, the cheaper the better. And low carb, the lower the better. We are probably enthusiastic when they are almost free and won't buy them if they are too expensive. The fulfillment of more or less is better requirements is typically linear related to satisfaction. Delighters belong to the marketing tools. They can make the difference in competition if products or services from competitors are similar in fulfilling the must-be's and the more or less is better requirements. Our customers would probably be thrilled if cookies contribute to physical fitness, are harmless to the teeth, and are packed in an environmentally friendly box. Delighters assure excitement. They are irrelevant for Six Sigma project in that they cannot compensate for deviations in the must-be's or low, more or less is better levels. We don't buy cookies that are harmless to teeth but taste bad. The must-be's prevent from dissatisfaction but do not create excitement. They are the important requirements in Six Sigma. If must-be attributes are not met as expected, then they are probably critical to quality. The more or less is better attributes of our products and services may also be relevant for Six Sigma, if they can cause dissatisfaction. It is a decision of your sponsor expressed in the objectives of the project charter which attributes of your product or service you should include in your project. Back to the tool. After determining the type of requirement according to Kano, the customer or manager respectively must estimate in the last question the extent or frequency to which the requirement is fulfilled as expected. Our customers told me that in the past 20% of cookies met their requirements on taste. In the feedback at the bottom of each block, all given answers are summarized. Please read these summaries after your data entry and correct entries if there are duplicates or blurs. On the bottom of this summary you can see the entry, the severity of being unsatisfied with the taste of cookies baked is 92%, and this is the first rank of 5. The calculated severity results from an exponential function in which the Kano type, in this case a must-be, is combined with a fulfillment level 20%. The ranking first of 5 results from the fact that I have already entered the other 4 problems regarding availability and consumption. And the next problem relates to the availability of cookies delivered. Here the customer demands that the cookies are delivered on the order date and complains that they were actually delivered too early. Requirements on availability make it easy to derive the attribute of the output because it is usually a question of the required quantity on the required date. According to the customer, the requirements are met if the cookies are delivered a maximum of ±1 hour too early or too late. In this case, the exact specification limits that will later become important in the data collection plan and in the process management plan can be already determined here. Being on time is a typical more or less is better requirement, just like the faster the better. Finally, the customer estimated that her requirement for punctuality of this output was met in 40% of the cases. A summary is then again created from this information. The problem cookies delivered, delivery more than 1 hour too early or too late, has a calculated severity of 60% and takes the second place of 5 problems. Scrolling down the list in the example file of Sigma Guide, you will find the definition of further problems on resource consumption. The next worksheet in Sigma Guide contains 2 tables with results. One includes the detailed summaries for each block that I have just presented. The second table includes only the most important information, voice of customer or business, the critical requirements and problems, their respective Kano category, the severity and the ranking of each problem in comparison to all defined problems. You can sort this table by severity with Ctrl-Shift-S. Then your critical problems, the CtQs, will be at the top of the list. Finally, Sigma Guide creates 2 graphics for the voice to criticals. The chart Y CtQ bar chart shows the severity of the problems compared in a bar chart. Let me explain the second chart in more detail. It shows the characteristics of the 3 Kano types with the problems located at their specific positions. But as you can see, I have mirrored the characteristics of the must-bes and delighter. And there is a reason for this. If you look at the original curve of the must-be characteristic, you can see that a must-be that is fulfilled in 50% of the cases leads to an almost indifferent, moderately satisfied. Now imagine, for example, that in 50% of the cases your telephone calls will be cancelled or 50% of your travels will be interrupted due to a breakdown. Of course, past experience also puts into perspective how satisfied we are with the 50% performance. But many people would probably say that even with this unreliability, they are more annoyed than being indifferent. To take this into account, I mirrored the must-be characteristic on its axis. I also mirrored the delighter characteristic. Imagine, after 50% of your phone calls or trips, you receive a free ticket for an event of your choice. This is unusual for communication and travel companies, and therefore these bonuses are delighter. And I would be almost completely enthusiastic about the 50% fulfillment of these bonuses. Therefore, I am convinced that the mirrored characteristics of the must-bes and delighter reflect reality better than the original ones. The more or less is better characteristic are left as in the original model. Now you are ready for the interviews. They are obligatory for the green belt certificate. But it's worth it. Be careful that you get not lost in information and make sure that you get all the answers you need. Stay persistent and ask as long as you are not sure that you have understood the answers.